You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Reaching all the way back to 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition. Here is your host of Fate Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am so pleased to be here with you. Thank you for joining us. I know you could be doing all kinds of things this evening, and you chose to listen to us, so thanks. I am very excited about tonight's guest. I am developing skills and interest with cryptid research, and I am trying to learn how to actually do the investigations well. I'm fortunate enough to have a book written by a friend called Admissible, which gives you information on how to get evidence on any number of things. Cryptids, ufology, paranormal things that people don't normally assume that you need that level of evidence for. But the author, Chase Klotsky, has been in ufology investigation for quite some time and decided that if there were going to be so many questions, then you needed to have rock solid evidence, and you needed to have an excellent chain of ownership of that evidence. And so that's how I started trying to do my investigations in the paranormal, and that's how I plan to do my investigations when I get there into cryptozoology. And tonight's guest is someone who, well, she is just brilliant. She has been awarded Dedicated Researcher of the Year. She has all kinds of pieces of information out there. She works with the Olympic Projiect. She has things in her home state of Texas that she investigates, and in fact has a conference coming up there. I mean, this is just going to be a fantastic evening, and Shelly Covington-Montana is my guest, and I hope that y'all enjoy her as much as I know I'm going to. Shelly, hi there. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hey, Kat. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our visit tonight, and I'm excited that you want to go about investigating cryptozoology in the proper sense as far as true evidence in the scientific world. And that's very unique at this time, because most people don't lead their evidence through scientific facts. They lead it through opinion and what they think is evidence. So this is exciting for me. So yes, thank you.
Well, you came very highly recommended to me by somebody I admire a lot, and that would be Nick Redfern. He said that if I wanted to talk to someone about Bigfoot and basically wilderness investigation, that you were it. So,
well, Nick is
that's a pretty
great
high.
guy.
Yeah, that's a pretty
awesome.
Good recommendation. So
yeah, I would think so, and I'm so humbled by Nick and how he always promotes me, and I appreciate it so much. And he understands I work really hard, because I go to Nick for all my questions about how I need to go about, when it's conferences or book deals or shows, he's always that guy. I'm going to head, in his direction and ask his advice. And he understands that proof is very important to me, and I'm not here because I want to go and scare myself in the woods or have that unique experience. He understands that this is a journey that I've been on for quite a few years through my husband's experience, and I feel it's important, and that the great North American Sasquatch deserves us to look upon it as a true entity that really is something that is important to this world. And I only want to be there to present the facts, not my opinion, not my emotional state involved with the research. It really has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the species itself.
Well, I am curious because I understand that your husband had an experience and that's what brought you into this. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am. So just a little background about myself and my marriage and me in general is I am a daughter of a law enforcement officer here in Texas. My father is a retired narcotics lieutenant for the state of Texas with Texas Ranger honors. So I was raised to always be truthful and always bring forth facts, no matter what it was. That was my life. I grew up in a family where my dad's job was never public. We always had to keep it secret because he was an undercover agent for the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. So anything I did had, especially in something like BigFoot or something that is considered, just kind of crazy, basically, in the South, that I better bring facts if I'm going to bring anything to the table. So that aside, my husband and I have known each other 43 years. I met him when I was 13 years old. He was my neighbor, and later, he's older than I am. So later in life, about 10 years down the road, I ended up marrying my husband, and I've been married to him now for 33 years. Throughout the time we were friends and married from the early 80s, he had kept telling me this story that had happened to him. Actually, there's two events, but the first and main event was him discussing with me. He was a hunter, and him and another friend of ours would go out hunting in the Angelina National Forest in southeastern Texas, on the border of Louisiana, and it was the Sabine River area. And he told me about himself going out hunting, and he, this one night, decided to go out. His buddy, Richard, was going to meet him the next day, and he decided he would go out that night and camp and wait for his buddy the next day so they could hunt together. And they'd been there many times. And this was during the time when everybody had the giant BigFoot four-wheeler trucks, that were lifted. And in Texas, you could just go off-road and go through the forest, and nobody would bother you. You could drive your vehicle wherever you wanted. There were no true regulations on where you could take your vehicle at that time. And my husband and his friends would go off, a couple miles down into the woods with their four-wheelers off-road. And this one night, he was by himself, of course, and he camps very light. He basically is a blanket and a couple of things to eat, his firearm, and that's pretty much it. And so he got to his campsite, which he says is about a mile and a half to maybe 2 miles off road down in this forest. And created a fire, and which he likes to build the fire on the back end of his truck, and he would sleep under the tailgate of his truck. He'd fold down his tailgate, put down a sleeping bag, and sleep under that. In case of rain, he would have a little bit of shelter from the tailgate. Anyway, he was laying there, and what had basically happened was something started circling his campsite. And he said it was creating a lot of noise, to the point where at first he thought maybe it was a cow, but he realized there's no cows in this area because we're not a free-range state. It's not like the Pacific Northwest or anything west of New Mexico where the BLM allows free range. That's
right.
not what happens in Texas. And he said he could hear huge breaking and snapping of something, but it was actually circling his camp. And long story short, by the time it came around the second time to circle his camp, he knew this was something that he didn't understand. He could not, Texas doesn't have large predators. I mean, we've been known to have possibly bear in the northeast part of Texas. Cougar, is considered to possibly be here, but the state of Texas doesn't really recognize cougar in the area. And we just, and wolves, we've had red wolf, but that's also considered an extinct species in the United States, except for, I believe it's South Carolina, where they've actually put those animals in the area. And they're a very small group of numbered individuals. Other than that, we just really don't have large predators. But something was literally circling his camp and breaking very large trees. He felt that they were breaking off giant branches off of trees, and it was circling his campsite. And after it came around the second time, he basically said, to heck with this, threw his gun and his sleeping bag in the truck, ran over the campfire, went into the edge of town, and slept at the gas station in his truck.
Wow.
And my husband is extremely brave. He's the guy that will go through the woods in the middle of the night with no headlamp. He's not afraid of anything. I've known him all my life, and this story kept coming up throughout our marriage, quite frequently. I want to say probably every couple months we would sit around and on Saturday nights me and him visit, and he would bring this story up, and I kept thinking, what the heck is that? I mean, what could that be? I know he's not a liar. I know he's not crazy. And then I don't remember. I think it was probably around 2010 to 2013. I'm not really sure. Something clicked in my head, and I said, "Are you talking about Bigfoot?" And he just looked at me and said, "I just didn't want you to think I was crazy."
Bless his heart.
And I knew right then. Right. I mean, we're talking 25 years, 30, almost about 25 years of him continually telling me this story over and over. And what he was trying to get me to do, I guess, was figure out what he was trying to talk about without him saying there was a Bigfoot in the area. And of course, this is Texas. In the 80s and 90s, or before then, we would have never thought about a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch in this region. We always considered it the Pacific Northwest. And I'd always been interested in it, but for it to be in Texas, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? But I knew my husband, and I knew he was a truth teller. And so from that day forward, I went into research mode. Our children were grown. They'd been out of the home for quite a few years, and I knew I could really delve into the research of what was going on, and I was really interested. And so for a few years, I just got online every day, probably 8 to 10 hours a day. And I want to say for about 3 years before I ever told anybody besides my husband, and researched everything I could about Sasquatch and anything I felt was related to it. And then here I am today, traveling the North America, looking for the great North American Sasquatch. And it's a really interesting and I think extremely important, and probably going to be, outside of UFOs, the most important discovery mankind will ever make.
Why do you think that?
Why?
Why do you think that's more important than other things?
Well, this might be a little controversial, but depending on what the great North American Sasquatch truly is, could be a huge leap in the medical field of the human race. If it is part human, which I'm not saying it is or it is not, because there's so much speculation out there, I don't know what it is. I do believe it's, a primate, and we're primates as well. Could it be Gigantopithecus? Could it be Neanderthal? Could it be all of those things intertwined? Could it be something completely different? I do not know. But I do know, for proof that it exists at this time, we have to have a body. How
Yes.
that comes about doesn't really matter. We have to have a body. And once we do get a body, there's going to be all kinds of research done on that body. And I think that if it is, let's say, part human, and it's living in the forests of North America without any assistance from modern man or fire or medical assistance, I think the immune system could be life-changing for the human race. And I'm not saying that's what we need to do. I'm just saying that's why I believe it's probably going to be the most important discovery of our time.
I could see that, because that just leads into all kinds of wonderful information, quite frankly, because it is dealing with the same environmental issues that we are. Other than GMO, but that's not true either, because
right.
it would be exposed as well, depending on the areas that it traveled through. I believe Sasquatch is closer to, basically plopping down right in the middle between the great ape and us as humans. I don't know exactly where the connection is. I'm not a scientist, and I don't claim to be. I'm just out there trying to collect tools to help me with discovery and with facts. And you're doing a good job with that.
I'm just a simple girl from Texas. Well, thank you.
And
I'm just a simple girl from Texas, like everybody else, but I'm trying to do it the right way.
Which is sometimes a bug in people's craw, but it is the right way.
Oh, girl.
Well, we're going to stop right there. We're coming back to that, because we are up already on our first break, and where does the time go when you're having a great discussion? I just don't know. But we will be back. This will be 3 minutes, and we will catch y'all on the flip side.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. And hello, we are back. I am joined tonight by Shelly Covington-Montana, and we have a comment in chat, Shelly, in our Spreaker chat that says that you are the utmost professional researcher who teaches tracking, fire making, and cast. I could use the fire making and cast preparation, and that you're the wilderness field researcher. And you do. You're part of the Olympic Projiect. I mean, this guy apparently knows your work very well.
Well, I have a few followers who are very supportive, I'll have to say, and I appreciate that. And I do work really hard, and I spend 4 months of the summer. I leave in June out to the Pacific Northwest and stay out there by myself and with some other groups. I'm also associated with the BFRO and the Texas BigFoot Research Center here in Texas. And so I'm really interested in what is facts and what is true evidence. When I do conferences, which I do quite a few a year, I talk about what really is the difference between our opinions that we think are evidence and what science would look at as evidence. Because at the end of the day, all I care about is if I get the attention of science. Because if you look at Bigfoot today versus what Sasquatch research was 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. Sasquatch is a whole different entity today. He does all kinds of things he never did before. In my world and in the scientific world, I believe Sasquatch does 5 things, just like everything else on this earth. He eats, he sleeps, he poops, he mates, and he dies. And that's all that matters. All the other things that people try to imply that Sasquatch does is really based on opinion, because we have no evidence that they've, done anything like done tree structures or tree breaks, which very well could be true, but there is no evidence, true scientific evidence, that has been done, because nobody has ever recorded seeing them do such things. So when people come to me and say, what do you think of this, meaning a tree structure or a tree twist or whatever, I'm like, well, who told you Bigfoot does that? And that kind of throws people off, and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and I'm sorry, but I don't have time for all that. If you've got an up-close encounter, which I also talk about stories. We've got plenty of stories now of, encounters that people believe were Sasquatch, that were either tree knocks or howls and such. And that's all great, and I appreciate those. But at this point, we need to be only focusing, in my opinion, up-close encounters where you can describe the face or the body, the muscle structure, what it did, how it reacted to you, because if you're that close, it was reacting to you. And I think that's the scariest thing about being in the field with such a Sasquatch, is not that I see it, but it actually sees me. I believe people have become complacent with their own knowledge of what they think they know about the woods, because if I've heard one person say it, I've heard 1,000 people say, I've been raised in these woods and I know that wasn't a bear.
Right.
Well, that's all fine and great, but science doesn't care about that. What I care about is what science wants me to do. At the end of the day, if I go to a scientist and say, this is the evidence I have for you, I want to pique their interest. A story's not going to give them interest. My opinion's not going to give them interest. True, hard facts, I can hit you over the head, is what's going to give them interest. And that is what my goal is. That is why I'm in the field. That is what I'm looking for. I'm on a constant trying to go out and find what I can to help with my tool patch. What is it, my tool bag? What is it in my tool bag that's going to help me get the attention of science? Because once I get the attention of science and I say, hey, I'm just a simple girl from Texas, I don't have a degree, but this is what I have, I guarantee you that Dr. Meldrum is one of those people who backs me and has told me I'm a true citizen scientist, and citizen scientist is a huge deal these days, and people need to pay attention to that. If you can be a true citizen scientist, science will help you. They will come out to help you, because the government entities, the private entities, do not have the manpower and they do not have the money to help us. They are depending on people like me and you who are going about it in a true citizen scientist aspect to help them prove things that are going on, be it any kind of science. That is a fact. I have researched the citizen scientist aspect, and there are organizations out there that are willing to help the average guy do research and collect proper data in the proper way, because government And private entities do not have the money or the manpower to do what we could do. And that is my goal.
Well, I know of several groups that are put together for that. And interestingly enough, it's not always just Sasquatch that they're involved in researching or helping people to research. They focus on ufology too.
Well, sure. But
it's interesting to me that those two things seem to be getting, especially in recent years, that those two things seem to be getting thrown together a lot more.
Which I think is a really bad idea.
I think so too, but tell me why you do.
Well, we can't do it all, right? I mean, what I tell people that ask me of my opinion about research in general, be it UFO, Sasquatch, or whatever you feel is your passion, make yourself an expert in one thing. Even like for me, it's not just Sasquatch, it's specific things within that category. I can't be an expert of anything if I don't perfect it and practice it. So I'm not going to try to perfect everything in Sasquatch research. I'm going to pick one thing that I know I'm good at and I know that I can really focus on, which is tracking. Tracking and cast making and wildlife DNA collection. I don't talk about what DNA evidence is. I can teach you how to collect DNA evidence or wildlife evidence. And my biggest goal is we were all doing it backwards. We were all trying to prove it's either Sasquatch or UFO or whatever. Not me. I'm more interested in disproving everything else and leaving Sasquatch at the end of the road. It's the last thing I'm going to look at. So let's say tracking and spore and sign is what I'm really focused on right now. I'm trying to get certified as a certified tracker in the United States so that I can go about and look at anything in the field that people are like, oh, well, look at this. This was made by a Bigfoot. Well, I'm going to try to tell you at least 3 things why it's not made by Bigfoot, because I know what else does it. We need to reverse how we look at research. Everybody wants to prove what is that entity instead of disproving everything else, natural occurrences, other animals, human behavior. All those things are super important. And if I hear one person say, oh, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, no human comes out here. Well, you're there. So that's
I always think that too. Yeah. Nobody ever comes here. Well, you did.
Yes, exactly. So that I think is a big deal in the sense of doing proper research is what are you exactly doing and why do you believe that? Where is the evidence that says this is 100% Bigfoot? Is it your opinion or is it facts? What the problem is I think people's experiences are way more important than the species itself in their world. For me, the species is the most important thing. My opinion means nothing. It doesn't, I'm just a tool. I'm just a tool to help. My name doesn't matter. Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is how I go about evidence collection. And my emotions, everybody puts their emotions into it. I try to retract my emotions because I try to follow that Occam razor rule. The most possible is most probable. And whether I agree with what happened or not really shouldn't matter. All that should matter is the facts that lay before me. And that's all I should be putting towards my data and my evidence collection, not what I think it should be. That's why I don't look within the Bigfoot community for help or reasoning. I look outside of the community. I don't even tell people what I'm doing when I ask for help. I just basically present something and say, what do you think this is? I don't ever mention the word Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
If you're not going out to the Bigfoot community, and it's large, and there are some good researchers involved in it, but if you're not coming to them, then when you go out and you're seeking outside information, are you seeking outside forensic help with things that you have found? Or are you, what specifically are you looking for when you step outside the realm?
Well, let's say I get vocals, which I never have, but there's plenty out there. I would take those vocals and send them to a wildlife animal sound specialist. I wouldn't be asking my Bigfoot friends, do you think, I put vocals and all kinds of, vocals in particular, on a spectrograph. And I'll look at them, and if they hit a certain hertz level, then, which is outside of human ability or wolf ability or coyote ability, if it doesn't fall within the abilities of known wildlife, then I would go outside the Bigfoot community and say, hey, to a specialist who does wildlife sound research, and there are those people out there.
Yes, there are.
That's the problem, that I don't think people realize that every aspect of what we think is research, there is a specialist outside of the Bigfoot community that knows these things. And that's what I try to do, is hunt those people down and send them those files and say, can you tell me what this is? It's just like with wildlife DNA collection. When I think the word unknown is extremely dangerous. If you go to a Bigfoot conference and someone gets up on stage and they say, I collected this hair, I sent it off to someone who did a comparison. So with hair, you can't really do DNA on it unless you have the root of the hair, but you can actually do a comparison with all other wildlife hair. And if that person comes back and says, I find it as an unknown, that's fine. But what you need to be doing when that person comes back with an unknown, you need to find at least two more outside representations who can look at it as well, and everybody needs to come to the same conclusion. Because when you are doing a comparison, there is a lot of room for human error, because there is not a right. And so people get up on stage and they'll say, this came back unknown. Well, how many times did it come back unknown? Did it come back unknown 3 times or 1 time or 5 times? How many times did you send that off? That becomes a dangerous word, because once you say unknown, everybody goes, oh, that's Sasquatch. That's a hair.
When basically
that's
all it
Sasquatch.
is unknown.
Well, basically
because
all it is unknown to the person that did the analyzation. And it doesn't mean they were always right, because this is not a for sure science. This is opinionated. This is somebody's knowledge working with that hair and making comparisons. And when you start really working with hair comparisons, they're very, very hard. It is not an easy science. And I'm not trying to talk down to those people. I just think that people are complacent, and once they get that idea, oh, so-and-so came back with unknown, so it has to be this or that, instead of continuing to search out for other people who will say, yes, that was unknown. I came to the same conclusion. You need it in the scientific world. You need at least 3 unbiased opinions that all come to the same conclusion. And then you've got something really cool.
Let me ask you something. We've only got, believe it or not, 3 minutes until our next break. I can't believe this time. But have you come across instances where you have, and we're going to get into some other stuff relevant to this after our top of the hour break because it's going to take some time, but where you come or have dealt with people who have dealt with forensic pathologists, for example, who say, well, we think this could be, we don't know. Have you had like mainstream pathology labs that were less than willing to come forward and say, this is something that's unusual? I know that in several other anomalous fields, that's an issue, a true issue.
I don't believe so. I honestly, there has been, and I'm involved with some things like with the Olympic Project where there have been some samples taken, and it's come back everything but primate. And no, at this point, unlike, I guess the only example, and I wasn't involved with it, the Justin Sameha event where he had blood on his boots and he came back with what they call bear. That was all involved with people who were on TV. And I'm not saying, and I know the people involved except for Justin Sameha, but Bart Catino is very involved, some others who I'm good friends with. I believe that story has something to offer. The people they chose to work with were more interested in TV views, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And it came back as bear, and that's fine. That is what it is, and that's in the past. I don't think so. Let's say if I came up with my big thing right now is I don't understand why people tend to want to send DNA evidence to a human DNA lab.
Right.
You need to be sending it to a wildlife DNA lab because, number one, it's pennies on the dollar. Number two, they're willing to, all you got to do is send in whatever you have and just say, what is this?
Right. And
they are people that work with a huge spectrum of wildlife, whereas the human DNA lab is going to focus on human DNA, correct?
You know what? I've got to stop you.
And sure.
I'm so sorry. We did hit that wall with this. Look, this is only 2 minutes, and we will be right back with more with Shelly Covington-Montana.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. And just like that, we're back with Shelly Covington-Montana. Y'all just welcome her, and thank y'all for being here with us. I am sorry I had to interrupt you, Shelly.
That's okay. No worries.
Well, would you like to continue?
I've dealt with a lot of... Of course. I've dealt with a lot worse in the field, so no worries whatsoever. It's totally fine. I'm having a great time, and I appreciate anybody that's here to listen and even consider my opinion. So,
well, we had someone over in the WBHM chat who was having trouble with her feed on her phone, so she's, I think, moved over to the Spreaker. And she is someone who is new to the field and is just through hiking and experiencing and finding things. She's been sending me some photographs, and it's amazing the things that she sees up in Wisconsin.
Uh-huh.
And she sent me one thing that looked like a shelter, like a built shelter.
Right.
I was like, well, is there a homeless guy there? But no one could have survived those temperatures. You know, no, it would have been so difficult.
But
it's
also
just interesting.
Have to start, right. So let's say let's talk about a shelter. What we have to understand and what we have to start really looking into is, what was that shelter made of? And how old is that shelter? Because different wood, let's just talk about trees, which I study trees, and how long does it take a tree to rot? Depending on the tree, there is a huge difference. So here in Texas, we have a lot of mesquite trees, we have a lot of oak trees, we have a lot of redwood trees, cedar trees. So a cedar tree is a tree that is known to pioneers to last hundreds and hundreds of years. And it was used to build fences as well as homes, simply because of how long it lasted. So you have to look, that's where I talk about complacency and people being complacent with what they think they know. Because what we think we know is, let's say on a graph, if we did a pie graph, what we think we know is about an eighth of that pie. What we know we don't know is maybe about not even a third of that pie. But what we really don't know is going to be more than 3/4 of that pie. So what I try to tell people is, when you find something like that, you need to really go in and research everything about that piece of quote unquote evidence that you think you have found. So in a tree structure, I would be looking at what kind of wood was made through that tree structure. What is the longevity of that wood? Look at the cover. You know, most likely it was covered with branches of foliage. And why would a Bigfoot need to make a tree structure? Every report I've ever gotten, and I'm part of the BFRO, which means I see, so BFRO only publishes probably 25% of the reports we get. I see reports that every report I've ever seen of a Bigfoot sleeping in the woods or just laying down in the woods. He didn't have a tree structure. He didn't come out of a structure. Why would he need that? What people are doing in that aspect, in my opinion, is they are implying human behavior. Like, Bigfoot needs cover. Why does he need cover? He doesn't even wear clothes or shoes, and he walks around in the snow. So why would he need? I mean, maybe he does, but that has never been proven in any of the stories throughout history. And we've got history of Bigfoot, Sasquatch-like creatures all the way back to the Vikings. So they never talked about that. But today, everybody wants to imply these human behaviors on the Sasquatch. Well, if he was human, why isn't he paying taxes and living in the city and building fires? That's the way I look at it. So when you find something that you consider as evidence, you need to go to you need to just really indulge yourself into that piece of evidence and find out everything you can outside of the Bigfoot community, into the scientific community of everything that you feel is part of the evidence you're looking at.
Interesting. I had wondered about the structures also, but then again, nobody ever finds nests or other things.
Right.
Like,
why would that be? I don't understand. If this creature isn't wearing clothing, then why does he need? So let's look at bear. So bear hibernate. Not all bear hibernate, and not all bear hibernate every year. It depends on the weather. So, and when they do, it's simply to slow down their metabolism, and because the temperatures are so low that they need to hibernate to conserve energy because they can't find enough food to maintain their body weight. These creatures have never been known or proven to hibernate. So why would they build structure? That is a lot of calories being burned to build a structure, be it for a sign that they're in, some people believe they built structures to say, this is my area. Some people believe they built structures to say, this is the way we went. I think all of that is people trying to justify their ignorance of what they think they know, that they don't really know because they don't go outside of their own knowledge and research to imply I have Bigfoot in my area.
Well, this particular individual is seeking answers. When she came across that, she was puzzled and fascinated because it was so interesting.
Well, but she
and
also,
unexpected.
I guarantee you, if she's in an area and she found a structure, I build structures when I go into areas all the time. So why didn't she think it was? And I'm not trying to sound your guest or your follower at all, but in general, this happens a lot. People have either seen it on a Bigfoot site that Bigfoot builds structures, or they find them odd. Boy Scouts do it all the time.
Well, she had been there like the day before or the weekend of, and there was nothing there.
Well,
and then all of a sudden there was something there, and it just took her by surprise, I think, because she has just started investigating cryptid type of things anyway. So she was just like, that is so weird. It was not there. And I said,
but it only takes, for an experienced bushcraftman, it only takes about 2 hours to build a structure.
Well, cool. I hope she's listening so that she can go back and look at her photographs and see that. I am interested because Kevin has moved over to the WBHM chat and said that But the tree structures and shelters are hearsay relevant to the behavior of Bigfoot, and the Sasquatch are mobile. Are all Sasquatch mobile? Do they not have family units that slow them down doing that? Or is there anything indicative of that?
So unless we see one do those things, we can't claim that that's what they do. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's interesting and it's cool. And, I would love for it to be all those things. But that's my opinion, or your listener's opinion, or Kevin's opinion, or somebody's opinion. I can't put my opinion. My opinion really has zero to do
right.
with
exactly,
Bigfoot
because you're
research.
seeking evidence.
Right.
Of behaviors.
So, exactly. We have never, ever, there is no recorded anywhere where anybody has ever seen a Bigfoot build a structure of any type.
But if they're, well, I think we've got that. But what about nesting or the family units thing? Is there any evidence relevant to what I would guess based on scat and stuff? Are they, because they would have to do something or they would have died out. There has to be some interaction.
Well, as far as family units, I'm sure there's some. I believe, so I have recordings that I've experienced myself, my own encounter.
Right.
Which in all the years I've done this, I've had 2 major encounters in one area 6 days apart, and I saw it. And I had tree knocks, and I should have sent those to you, and you probably could have played them. I had tree knocks that were coming from either side of me for 2 days. And actually these creatures or whatever was doing, and I think they were tree knocks because I understand wood on wood, and I did a couple of days of working on all kinds of trees with all kinds of different objects, from rock to pine trees to cedar trees, hitting certain objects.
Right.
And I had more than one entity knocking back and forth, and I'm in the middle for hours on end for 3 days. And as far as family units, well, of course, I believe I don't know if they're family units. What I believe, which has no evidence to it, but just over time and what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've investigated, I believe probably there is a male who, you've got a female and a male who have a baby. And I think that male hangs out until that baby is a certain age, and then he moves on. I don't really believe that they stay as a family unit throughout their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that that they are all motivated by instinctual behavior, by spreading the gene. I believe they only mate probably every 4 to 6 years, like all great apes do. So this is one of the things, and I'll just kind of throw this out there, and it's just my opinion. There's no facts to it. But what I've been looking at is the overall, I've been looking at where you have clusters of sightings and calls, let's say. And it seems, so let's say there's a place that has a couple of sightings, or let's say up to 5 sightings in the same year. All of that will stop within a year and then it comes back about 4 to 6 years later.
Okay.
I believe that calls are associated with mating rituals. And I believe that these females are having babies about every 4 to 6 years and going back into certain places. And I believe males travel around looking to spread their seed
to keep the species going.
Different, right. But that's just me speculating. There's no evidence of that. It's just me looking at the long-term evidence of where calls and sightings are happening. And that's just kind of the idea I'm kind of venturing into.
Well,
and
we're
I'm
going to touch base on this again because we are up against our top of the hour news break. I can't believe it, but we'll be gone for 5. Good time to stretch out.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Sony Pictures Classics' new film, Never Look Away, from the writer-director of Academy Award-winning The Lives of Others, and inspired by real events. In select theaters now.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Bipartisan border security negotiations broke down in Washington today ahead of a Friday deadline to reach a spending agreement to avoid another partial government shutdown. Lawmakers and the White House clashed over whether to limit the number of migrants authorities can detain, along with the restrictions on border funding. NPR's Mara Eliason has more.
For the president, the big dilemma is what's best for him politically. You heard him give a State of the Union address last week, which was really the first speech of his reelection campaign. He's going down to the southern border this week. That could be considered his first 2020 election rally. He's going to have a rally in El Paso. So the president has to decide, is it better for him to compromise with Congress, or is he concerned that the amount of money for border security that he'd have to agree to is so small that his base would think he has wimped out on the wall?
NPR's Mara Eliason. Trump's rally in El Paso is tomorrow night. Virginia's embattled Democratic leaders are standing firm despite a nearly unanimous call by politicians in and out of the state to step down. The public's reaction, though, is more divided, as NPR's Cheryl Corley reports from Richmond.
The 3 men in the center of this political crisis are Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, Attorney General Mark Herring, both criticized for appearing in blackface years ago, and Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who says sexual assault charges leveled against him are not true. Although there have been mounting calls for all 3 to step down, the patrons at Mama J's restaurant in Richmond had much more of a wait-and-see attitude about the lieutenant governor, and 55-year-old Chuck Small says Governor Northam should remain in office.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying blackface is okay, but I'm like, you got to have some forgiveness, right? And know what the Bible always says?
The governor says he plans on using the turmoil here as a tool to promote racial reconciliation. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Richmond.
Teachers in Denver plan to strike tomorrow over pay. NPR's Claire Lombardo reports bargaining fell apart last night after months of negotiations with Denver public schools.
After district leaders introduced a new proposal, union leaders ended negotiations, saying the district was playing games. They indicated they'd be open to resuming bargaining on Tuesday. The union is pressing for changes to teacher pay, especially to the system of bonuses that some educators receive. The 2 groups have been negotiating for over a year. About 70,000 students in Denver schools will be affected by the strike. The district hopes to keep most schools open with help from substitutes, though preschools will be closed due to staffing requirements. Claire Lombardo, NPR News.
Snow is piling up in the Pacific Northwest from a powerful storm that's left several motorists in eastern Washington state stranded in heavy drifts, and many highways are closed. Several people say they had to abandon their cars on the roads, and authorities say at least a dozen had to be rescued. Drivers are being asked to stay off the roads. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. The city of Paris is suing Airbnb in what has been a long, contentious battle over regulating vacation rentals. Jake Ciganero reports the lawsuit could cost the rental platform up to €12.5 million.
A new Paris housing law requires vacation rentals be registered with City Hall. It also limits rentals to 120 days a year. The city recently found at least 1,000 unregistered properties on Airbnb. Each illegal listing risks a fine of more than €12,000. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo told French media she doesn't have anything against people trying to make a little extra cash. She wants to shut down property owners who only rent to tourists and who keep out locals in a city already short on housing. Since 2011, Paris has lost 12,000 inhabitants a year. The Paris mayor assigns a heavy amount of blame to rental companies like Airbnb. According to media reports, Airbnb alleges Paris's rules violate European Union standards and says the city's regulations are overly burdensome. For NPR News, I'm Jake Saganero in Paris.
At the weekend box office, the Lego Movie 2, the second part, easily took the top spot with $35 million in estimated ticket sales. The animated sequel had been forecast to draw around $50 million. Taraji P. Henson's What Men Want, that's a loose remake of the 2000 Mel Gibson comedy, debuted with $19 million. In third place, Lionsgate's Cold Pursuit, debuted with $10 million, in line with expectations, despite the controversy that surrounded its star, Liam Neeson, in the week leading up to the film's release. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Did you know you can ask Google Home to play NPR podcasts for you? It's easy. Just ask. Like, play the Fresh Air podcast. Use Google Home or Google Assistant to connect with your favorite shows anytime.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Hello there. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host. This is a fascinating show. I hope you're enjoying it. And if you had to miss that first hour, no fear. We're available with our archives on iHeart, iTunes, and in Google Play, as well as Podbean, Stitcher, and a couple of other locations as well. And tonight's guest is Shelly, Montana, Covington-Montana. And I'm so fortunate to have you here, Shelly. I am enjoying this conversation. I am fascinated by some of the things that you're bringing up. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to bring in from the first hour, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I'm enjoying myself.
Thank you. You know, we were talking and you had mentioned that without a body, no matter how it's acquired, but without a body, you can't really do the testing that would need to be done to ascertain species, to ascertain, you were talking about the immune system, all these other things that would be beneficial to us as a species to have information on. And I'm curious because if these creatures are loners, they do have a social structure, I would assume, because they do propagate. And we were talking about that right before the break. But where are the bodies? Why aren't there any around?
Well,
in your opinion. I know it's an opinion, but...
Yeah, exactly. It's an opinion, but... And I'll say, it's very, very rare to find a bare body in the woods. And we know they die.
Yes.
Now, what we have to understand also is it depends on... So right now, I have a game cam on. My family has a ranch here in Texas, and we raise cattle, and we have cattle that die periodically. We just had 3 cows die and a horse not long ago of blackleg. Even though we had done all the medical and vaccinations this spring, we do them every spring, sometimes it doesn't work. So I put a game cam on one of our cows that has died, and we have a boneyard, as we call it. And it really depends on the environment that they're in. Let's say that a Sasquatch just lays down and dies, and let's say it's a quote unquote rogue male. Let's say it's a young, a 20-year-old guy who doesn't live with his parents anymore and doesn't live within a family unit, but he's out looking to procreate, right?
Right.
he just lays down and dies because he got injured somehow. It really depends on the environment. Summertime, things are going to disintegrate extremely quickly. In the Pacific Northwest specifically, it's very wet and humid, and things can disintegrate quite quickly. We don't know that these things, like all other wildlife, will go and hide themselves when they know they're going to die.
Cats do
I
that.
don't understand. Yeah, so I don't understand why they do that, because wildlife, in general, it's not an easy life. You don't get to live out old age. You are either killed by other animals or you die of disease, and then scavengers come and scatter your bones. So when we don't, quote unquote, find bones, it really doesn't bother me when it comes to Sasquatch, because I think they're intelligent enough to go and hide themselves. And this is the other thing. Their morphology, about the way they are built, I consider them rock apes. And what I mean by that is I believe these things can scale a flat wall in a matter of seconds, and they live high and above everything else.
I've heard that theory was expounded.
They're just built that way. I used to be a bodybuilder, and if you look at what the average description of a sighting of a Sasquatch body, how he was built, looks like a bodybuilder, and the upper body is massive and dense and thick and just full of muscle, and their arms are longer than their legs, and so on and so on. Their triceps and their lats are huge, and that tells me they're climbers. They can scale up a wall. And if you take into account Dr. Meldrum's ideas about the mid-tarsal break, the front of the foot can get really flat and really wide and slap along. I mean, think of is it the chameleon, the little desert lizard that can climb up walls? I think of Sasquatch that way. I believe truly that Sasquatch falls on all fours and scampers across the forest floor a lot more than people realize, simply to hide himself. Because from point A to point B, when people say, hey, I saw the Sasquatch, I looked away and I looked back and he was gone, I don't think he ran off. I think he fell to the forest floor and scampered off. But as far as why we don't find bones, I think they go high and far away to where most men have never been and are able to hide themselves. Maybe we've actually found those bones in the archaeological discoveries, but I don't know. Or maybe we will someday. And then, some people believe that they buried their dead, and I don't know about that, but it's a possibility if they're that kind of intelligent. But anyway, I just believe that environmental entities are what are causing us not to find bones, because we don't find bare bones. We don't find mountain lion bones very often. And we know we have plenty of bear and we have plenty of mountain lion, but we don't find their bones very often because they go off and they hide and they die in areas where they're not found by other scavengers.
That's interesting. I had heard all kinds of different things because I live near the Talladega National Forest outside of Birmingham, Alabama. There's a lot of people who traipse through those woods seeking.
Right.
And I've been told that there's experiences. I've been told a lot of things in that area. And also, where I live is like the home of the skunk ape as well. Okay? So, it's just so hard to understand why. I have one person who is familiar with family units and has seen or experienced them. I've actually seen one of his videos that I was just watching it, and he was filming. There was something that was beside a tree that just got up and walked off. And I was like, really? I would like to see that better. Okay.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is what I've experienced and what I believe true Sasquatch evidence as far as people's experiences is these things, when they're in the area, they don't care. They are not afraid of us. They know they're bigger than us.
I think they're nosy sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had an experience where I woke up in the middle of a very early, like right before daybreak. And this was 6 days after I saw a subject in the exact same spot. We had traveled, or we had an encounter. It was the one where I was talking about the tree knock. Then I actually saw it. I don't know. I think I may have sent you the picture of 3 entities walking through the forest I drew, which is not 3 entities. It's one that walked through the trees 3 times. But 6 days later, we went back to this place, set up my tent, fell asleep. I was so exhausted. I didn't even take off my clothes. I slept in my clothes and woke up right before daybreak with rocks and sticks hitting the tree next to my tent for 30 minutes. And I know it was not pine cones. I know it was not elk, because I could feel the rocks and the sticks bouncing on the ground underneath my sleeping pad. And nobody else in the camp could hear it. And I laid there with my 45, scared to death, because I couldn't see outside my tent, because I for the first time, had not opened my flaps on my tent so I could see out.
Oh, wow.
These things are not scared of us. If they're in the area, I believe they will make themselves known, because I think they were throwing the rocks and the sticks not to make us leave, but to get me to come out of the tent so they could get better looks at us. I think that's why they throw rocks, not to make us leave, but they want to get a better. So think of it this way. I'm 5'4" and 115 pounds. I'm not a big lady. Sasquatch is at least, what? Let's say 7 foot tall, probably 500 pounds. It's way easier for him to throw a rock at a tree, because I believe they're accurate as hell, because they're hunters. They live in the woods. We don't. And it's way easier for them to get us to step out so they can get a good look at us than them to step out and come up on us. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, because they're not vulnerable, but they'd much rather, I would think, be in charge, be the lookers. And we've got to go. We've got to break. I can't believe this. My shows go fast, but this one is flying by. So
that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. You're fascinating. And we will be back in 3 minutes. So don't go far.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Son of a...
Hey, son.
Mother...
Son, what are you doing?
Hey, Mom. I'm getting ready to listen to Periscope Uncensored.
By expanding your vocabulary.
Well, it is uncensored.
Son, the uncensored part of Periscope Uncensored is Jax and I getting down to brass tacks with all aspects of the paranormal. There's no fluff on our show.
So, no off-color commentary?
I didn't say that.
Awesome!
Son?
I just hit my head.
Oh boy, I'll go get you an ice pack. Catch Periscope Uncensored Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. And we are back on Fate Mag Radio. I'm Kat Hobson, your host, with Shelly Covington-Montana. I am so excited, Shelly, and I apologize. We keep coming up on these breaks like they're going out of business here.
That's okay. No worries, girl. I have no problem with that.
But we're just zooming. But when you were talking about, they're drawing us. They're not afraid of us. They want us to come out so that they can check us out. Okay. And one theory that I wanted to put out there is that they're used to all these great big men marching around the woods, and they're out hunting them, and they're literally hunting them. And, so you're a novelty. Right?
Well,
and you don't run. I mean, they were knocking, you weren't running. You are out there for months at a stretch. You've got your little truck with your big dome and, your tent and your fire circles. You're out there doing the work. You're out there doing what they're accustomed to seeing men do.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, as a woman, and this is, my husband believes in me first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
I go out for long stretches. You know, I miss my anniversary and both of my children's birthdays in the summertime because I spend from June to September in the Pacific Northwest. And I drive out all by myself. And I camp in areas all by myself. I'm on a heightened experience that I am weary of everything going on around me, and I don't take any quote-unquote chances.
Mm-hmm.
I carry a InReach with me, which is a satellite phone, so I can reach my family every day, which I do. It also tracks every place I go, so in case I do get in trouble, they will know where to find my body, basically. You know, if I get eaten by a bear, they will know where to find the bear.
Right.
So, but as being a female, that has led me into the idea of, because if you listen to encounters over the last couple of 100 years, there is an interesting aspect about females in the sense that children and females have been, quote unquote, approached or abducted. And I don't know that I believe only probably 1% of that, but
right.
I find that the female entity might be more approachable than the male entity because we're a smaller entity. Our voices are higher and softer, and we tend to giggle more than we laugh. And so as that goes, I have decided to put together a female research group, quote unquote experiment, I guess, or inquiry, for this summer, and I haven't really announced it. So your show is kind of the first
Yay.
to hear about this. It is more about, so everybody is always trying to predict what Bigfoot Sasquatch does. I am looking into maybe possibly being an entity where Sasquatch can predict what we do. And that is where I came into the female Sasquatch inquiry. So what I'm trying to do is gather a group of women through they have to actually apply for the position. It's going to be very scientifically motivated, where it's only data collected, and our purpose and motivation is to be predictable. I want to do this in Oregon this summer for at least 6 weeks, if not more. I understand that women cannot, or people in general just cannot take off for a couple of months. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place myself in a location for at least 6 weeks and have different women who apply and are approved to come in, if they can come in for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks, whatever time they can come in, to basically hang out with me and help me collect data. We're going to have DNA traps, hair traps. We're also going to be predictable in the sense that we're going to do the same thing every day. Each day we are there. So let's say at 7 o'clock in the morning, we're going to collect water. At noon, we're going to go down and do a hike, a 3-mile hike on this certain trail. In the evening, we're going to cook a dinner, and so on and so on. And I'm going to try to produce a event for 6 weeks solid where we can collect data, and if there is any Sasquatches in the area, we might be something that they're attracted to, because from, like I said, it's considered a known thing, and I'm just doing, quote unquote, this little experiment. Are we really that approachable as a female group? If it was a true experiment, then we would have males do the exact same thing also. But this is, quote unquote, an inquiry. Right. We're just wanting to see what we can gather as evidence and if we can produce any activity. And so I'm really excited about that. My good friend, and her name is Cindy Cadell. She's probably my best friend in the Bigfoot world, who thinks along the same lines as I do, is my partner in this. And we're trying to get sponsorships for food, for equipment. We want to set up FLIRs in every corner of our camp. We're also going to, like I said, set up all kinds of DNA traps, hair traps. She was the liaison for Les Stroud on his Bigfoot show. So she's got some great contacts to help me, as well as she's putting on an event in Bend, Oregon, which I'll be speaking at, called, I think it's called Bigfoot and Brews, where different breweries are going to make different kind of Bigfoot beers, and different speakers are going to be in different breweries, and you can come to the town on that day and go to a specific brewery, drink that Bigfoot beer and listen to a speaker, and then you walk over to the next brewery and drink more beer and listen to more speakers. So she's actually got her archaeology degree specifically because of Bigfoot. And she's worked with the BLM, and a really fantastic lady. If you can get to know her, you should. I've also am working this summer with my good friends, Nathaniel York and Kurt Brandenburg, who are exceptionally brilliant men who have always supported me and led me in the right direction. And if you can get to know them, you should. But yeah, so I think that predictability could be something in the Bigfoot world.
I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, because they are stalkers. They do know when you're out there. They hunt because,
well, you know. Well, yeah. I mean, it okay. So
the safety would be in the numbers, but the attention getting would be in the patterns.
Right. But also, let's look at it this way. So, say somebody broke into your home, but they didn't really disturb anything in your home, and they left. I guarantee you, if you went home, opened your front door, you would be like, somebody's been here. Mm-hmm. Who's been in my home? I think Sasquatch, and like I said, I think they're rock apes. I think they're at the highest point, and they overlook their territory, and they know what they're looking for. They watch their food come in, they watch their food go out, and they watch intruders who are us humans. And I think we intrigue them. You know, I think their intelligence level is above the great apes. Do I think they're as intelligent as us? Not if they lived in the city, but it goes hand in hand. I think if you and I tried to say, okay, I'm going to leave the city and live in the woods for the rest of my life on nothing but what is in the woods, we'd have a hard time. Whereas the Sasquatch absolutely knows what he's doing, and he doesn't need anything.
And he knows
what
what's dangerous to him, food-wise and lifestyle.
Right. So.
Fascinating.
Anyway.
I love it.
I just, at the end of the day, is it about me or is it about the species? The species is what is so amazing. It's the great North American Sasquatch. How lucky are we? I mean, and it's not a weird, crazy idea.
No, it's not.
It's
well thought out, in my opinion. And,
right. And
I think it's a good plan.
Well, and there are organizations that you can join. Now, you have to pay for them. But, and I can't remember the names of these organizations, but I could come up with them. But you can say, hey, I want to help out. And there are citizen scientist organizations that will take you to places like Brazil and these rainforests, and you spend 2 to 3 weeks there. You pay like $5,000. You help them discover new species, and they give you all the tools on how to do it within the group, and you get to be a part of that. That's what I feel like I'm doing right now. I am helping science with the discovery of the great North American Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. And my grandchildren are going to be like, oh, yeah, my grandma was a great explorer. And that's what I want to be, so true to the science and to the species itself, that when my name comes up, nobody says, she was full of shit. Excuse my language, but sometimes we got to use bad language to express exactly what we mean. I want the species to be a part of me, and I be a part of it as far as doing it justice. And that's what I am here for.
I think it's admirable.
That's what I'm here for. Well, it's my love. It's my passion. It's, my opinion means crap. The solid evidence and the truth and the fact that I always walk around saying pro-proof is truth. And I think Sasquatch deserves that.
Well, I agree with you
because
there's so many jokes and there's so many memes and there's so much irreverence. There's so much irreverence and mockery of scientists who are trying to solve these issues and find these questions. And this is an actual being. I mean, people are like, oh, well, there's no evidence. Well, there is trace evidence. There's scat. There's fur that gets left behind. There is circumstantial evidence to beat the band.
Well, we've got plenty of stories.
Yes.
Dating back hundreds of years. And you could even take out all the Native American stories. And I'm Native American, and people always ask me the Native American aspect, and because Native American blood runs through my veins, I'm like, well, myths and legends were never meant to be proven. They were teaching tools.
Yes.
Because there was not a written language, amongst the Native American culture. So they told stories. But the Sasquatch was always involved in every Native American tribe that's ever been. that tells a lot.
Yes.
And, but I want to be more than true than just the Native American aspect. I want modern science to say, Shelly Covington-Montana found something, and, okay, if she found something, then we need to investigate it. Because I'm the simple guy. I'm just like all the other investigators in this field. We're just regular people. But if I can step up my game and try to mimic science in the aspect that if I say, Dr. Meldrum, this is what I found, Dr. Meldrum would call me and say, Shelly, let's talk. And he would believe me. I know many people who have called Dr. Meldrum, and Dr. Meldrum is kind of like, okay, that's cool, thank you, bye. I don't want to be that girl.
Right.
I want somebody to take me seriously. And I try to mimic what they expect of me. Because science works. People think it
Yes.
doesn't in the entity of fringed ideas, being UFOs, cryptozoology, mythical, magical monsters. No, if you can put yourself in that right frame of mind, look outside of that, like I look outside of BigFoot people to find my information, and I go to true experts who know what they're talking about, then I might get some true help in what I'm trying to do. And I just want to prove it, that's all. But not everybody wants to prove it. They just want to experience. A lot of people, come on, Kat, come on, you and I know there's a lot of people that just want to be looked upon as famous or get their name out there because they
at any cost
about this. Yeah.
At
and
any
I'm
cost.
not that girl.
And that's
Right.
any field, though. That is
Right.
in any field, whether it be, research medicine or,
Right.
whatever. I'm a paranormal investigator. There's a lot of that. People would not do a lot of the things they do without ego. Right?
Exactly.
It's like, I want to be the best at what I do. You want to be the best at what you do. There is some notoriety that's, for whatever reason, seems to follow some things. And it's not about me. No, it's about the work.
It's about the work.
Yes.
And that's what I feel is, that's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is Sasquatch for me. What can I do to bring forth evidence that Sasquatch actually exists? That's all I care about. I don't care about the Facebook Bigfoot world, which has really messed up the Sasquatch field because it's created this entity of Sasquatch that is nothing like it was 200 years ago. It was, Sasquatch 200 years ago was this living entity in the woods, and every Native American tribe considered them a different entity. They were either a cannibal or a forest friend or whatever.
But they carried over in a lot of them too. But you know what? We've got to hit that break. I'm so sorry, but we will be right back.
That's okay.
Y'all give us 2.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. And we are back for our final segment with Shelly Covington-Montana. And if you have missed this, goodness gracious, you're going to be so disappointed all the way until you pick those archives up on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, wherever you want to go. But you know what? This has been a great show. We've got to get through some other things, and I can't wait until we do this the next time because there's so much more.
Yeah, there really is.
There really is.
Yeah. So anything you want to talk about, I'm open. I'm an open book.
Well, you really are. And all people have to do is reach out to you, and you're more than happy to discuss your work and your findings. You know, you are a dedicated researcher. I understand why you won that award. It's what you do, and it matters to you.
It really does. It's my life goal, and I'm really supported by my family and close friends. I've got a lot of people who consider me they consider themselves as my friends, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, I don't appease to people's opinions. I appease to the facts.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of consider myself, like Renee DeHinden's daughter. He was an angry asshole, and excuse my French, but he put forth the true facts, and that's what I'm here for. My father would expect that. My husband expects that. I dedicate a lot of time and my own money, which is a lot of money, to what I do. And, a lot of people consider this, just a fairy tale, and I don't. So I take it extremely seriously. This has nothing to do with my opinion. It has to do with the facts that are given. But what people do is they are complacent. They don't look for facts. They look above the facts or beyond the facts because they're ignorant in the fact that they don't self-educate. And I try really hard to do that because I'm just
there's so much material.
Joe.
There is so much material out there.
There is.
Centuries worth if you go back. Yeah, you don't have to just start in the 40s or 50s, right? You can go back through Lewis and Clark. You can go back, as you said, to the Vikings.
Well, right. But even if you didn't have that history, let's say you had a Bigfoot experience all on your own and you had never seen anything written in history about Bigfoot, you shouldn't really have to go back and look at the history. What you should be doing is looking at the facts about wildlife and natural occurrences. There is science that involves all those things and why it is what it is. So that's where I put myself. It's not, the history is amazing and great. All that does is tell me, yeah, there's something weird going on out there. But what I focus on is the science that involves what is happening right here and right now. And that is what is so compelling and so interesting and so fantastical. It's just like my tracking certification stuff that I'm working on right now. It's not about just the tracks that you see in the ground. It's about the spore, which spore is every single thing that is left behind by an entity that went through the area. So a broken branch or a nut that was cracked open. Those are the things I study, and what could have made that, and why did it make it, and what time of year did it make it, and what region was it in, and what animal did that, and how did it do that, and why did it do that? Those are the kinds of science I'm interested in, because if I can go about that science, I can discount everything else. And then if I can't explain this Bigfoot encounter, I may have something.
Yes. How many
Bigfoot
cases
should always be last.
How many cases have you had that you've been researching, incidents and experiences that people have reported that you've been investigating? How many have come up with no logical explanation?
A handful.
But that
honestly.
handful are significant?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's the thing is it's hard for me, because when Facebook has, okay, this is what I always like to say. When insanity found the internet, it messed up Bigfoot research.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have all these crazy, cool cases until the internet came along. I've got cases that are 50 years old that were never spoken about on the internet in Texas, because people didn't want to talk about it because they felt they would be considered crazy.
Right.
But what you see in those type of cases are these Bigfoot just act as normal wildlife. They don't do anything weird, or there's no human aspect applied to it. Like, they're not building a quote-unquote structure.
Mm-hmm.
They're standing in the field waving their arms like, look at me, which I assume has something to do with there's something going on somewhere else around them. But, yeah, it's only a handful of cases, and most of them are up close. Like, they can describe the eyes and the teeth and the hair on the body. Like, I've got one guy who describes to me that there are cowlicks on the shoulders. Like, the hair actually rotates to where it looks like a cowlick on all the joints. I find those kind of things extremely important. My favorite encounter here in Texas is the hog hunter encounter, where a gentleman was in his tree stand and he had baited an area in this kind of open field with a tree line that squared off this field, and he was hunting for hogs, and he was in his tree stand watching the hogs come up to this baited area. But he saw something out of the corner of his eye in the tree line. He looks over, and then this quote-unquote Bigfoot, who is watching the hogs, and it's jumping back and forth from tree to tree, lining up the hogs. And then it leaps out like a frog on all fours to the hogs and slaps the hog so hard it hits a tree, and then he jumps on it and he beats it with his fist and kills it.
Oh, my goodness.
Those are yeah, it's a great encounter. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, do.
And those encounters I'm most interested in because basic wildlife behavior.
Yes, they
this
are.
This Bigfoot was just hunting. There was no human behavior involved. There was no BS chatter involved. He was hunting to survive.
Yeah.
He ran out. Well, he beat the hog. He picked the hog up. But the weird thing was, he looked up towards the hunter in his tree stand and showed his teeth. And I've got many encounters. I've taken many reports where they show their teeth like a dog will.
Yeah.
And it, shows its teeth.
Like, stay back. Do you mean like a warning? Oh no, have we lost you, Shelly? Not for long. Welcome back.
I'm sorry. I don't
It's
know
okay.
what happened.
Well, my question was that teeth, was it like a teeth bearing, like a threatening thing?
Yes. It was. It showed his teeth, like, stay back. It put the hog under his arm and turned around, and another whoop came from the tree line, like, whoop, like.
Oh my goodness.
There was more than one. Those are the encounters I'm interested in. True wildlife behavior with these things.
Well, we've got I've got to tell you, we've only got 2 minutes. So
that's okay.
Do you want to tell people how to get in touch with you so that if they're interested in participating in your women's event, then the Female Sasquatch Inquiry, or just to talk with you? Tell them how to find you.
Absolutely. Well, the easiest way to get in touch with me is my Facebook page, which is Shelly Covington-Montana, and just IM me, just message me, and I keep up with that. You can also contact me at scovington1963@gmail.com. But my Facebook page is my most active page. But I'm also active on Instagram at CryptoChick2. And but yeah, if you want to visit, contact me at Shelly Covington-Montana on Facebook.
Well, I have to tell you that this has been a fantastic show. I'm so glad you joined me tonight.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it so much, and thank you for having me.
Well, this was neat, and it went so quickly. Even the chat room is like,
it did.
Oh my goodness, this is just going by at warp speed. I'm like, I know. So thank you again, and I do want to let our listeners know, thank y'all for being here, because this is just the reason, y'all are the reason we do this. And here at Fate Magazine, go ahead.
And if anybody wants to research with me, I'm doing 3 BFRO expeditions. One will be if you go to the BFRO expedition site, look for Kurt Brandenburg, and I will be teaching classes at all 3 of his expeditions. 2 will be in Washington, and 1 will be in New Mexico. And I will be there teaching tracking and casting and DNA collection.
I saw that. That's going to be fantastic. And the New Mexico one, I'm hoping I'm going to be in the area for. I'm kind of waiting to check those dates against something else.
Cool.
But anyway, don't forget that starting tomorrow night with Paranormal Pride with Denise Pridemore, then we have Hidden World with Clarissa and Chris. Then I'll be with you Wednesday night with Paranormal Experienced. Thursday is Periscope, Uncensored. I could not think of the Uncensored. I'm so sorry. That's with Clarissa and Jax. And then Friday night, Shelly will be back with a brand new Ghost Talk Radio, and that's going to be wonderful. So, I hope that your week is wonderful. I hope that you are just blessed through the whole thing. And you know what? Same cat time, same cat channel. Thanks for listening to Fate Mag Radio. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, Kat. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.